The views, opinions, and presentations of the guest are not intended to establish a standard of care to be followed by the audience. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions or concerns you may have regarding your health. Furthermore, the assumptions, views, opinions, and insinuations made by the host and guest do not reflect those of the show and the management. Zach at Zydus brings you a patient care program, Health Talk, a lay forum that gives various information on illnesses and diseases with advice from medical experts. Join us live on Facebook.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone. I am Fort Sagabay from Zydus Philippines, and welcome to another episode of Health Talk, your weekend source of good talk on good health. And that's Health Talk. Salamat po sa pagsama ninyong lahat sa amin ngayong hapong ito. Ngayon po ay September 5, araw po ngayon ng Saturday. I hope that all is well with you guys at sa ating mga Facebook viewers from all over the Philippines. Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat, lalo na sa mga doctors na kasama natin ngayong araw na ito. And today, another exciting and learning field session ang ating matutunghayan. So ang ating guest this afternoon would be none other than Dr. Margie Holmes. She graduated magna cum laude with a degree of Bachelor of Arts in Psychology from the University of the Philippines, Diliman, and was adjudged the most outstanding graduate in her batch by the University of the Philippines Alumni Association. Si Dr. Holmes was also awarded a scholarship grant from the East-West Center to study at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, where she received a Master of Public Health major in International Family Planning with special studies in sex therapy and marriage counseling. Kaya sa mga mag-asawa, pwede po kayong pumunta kay Dr. Holmes. Her credentials also paved the way for her to be a TV host of the award-winning show Sex Talks with Dr. Holmes, which was shown in 4 other countries. And she was also part of Taysinan Tahanan. So, ladies and gentlemen, without much further ado, let's have Dr. Margie Holmes.
Anyway, Forts, thank you so much for inviting me. At lahat po sa inyong nakikinig at nanonood, maraming salamat po for being here.
Okay, it's nice to have you with us this afternoon, Dr. Holmes. And it's a very interesting topic that we'll be talking about, strengthening family ties. And of course, yung mga viewers natin, they're very excited to know more about these dilemmas and simplifying solutions that we'll be talking about. So without much further ado, I present to you our topic this afternoon.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, I'll talk na, no? Okay, thank you very much, Forts. Ang ating pag-uusapan ho ngayon is strengthening family ties. At ako ho yung pumili ng subtitle which is deconstructing dilemmas and simplifying solutions. Kasi ho, yung karanasan ko ho bilang psychotherapist, no, sa clinical experience ko, nakikita ko na minsan yung problema ay dahil masyado nating nilalakihan yung problema. Na parang hindi natin talaga naiintindihan yung basehan at siguro kung maintindihan natin ito, mas magiging simple yung problema. And therefore, sana, mas magiging simple ang solusyon. Tingnan natin kailan ho ito nangyayari. So can we have the next slide, please? Okay, so ngayon titingnan natin, meron bang paraan para makita natin ano ang nangyayari ngayon sa lockdown na nakakatakot, nakaka-depress, at paano natin how can we deal with this, all right? Now, in my clinical experiences, there are 3 major things na nagbago na nagkaroon tayo nitong COVID-19 at nagkaroon ng lockdown. Okay? Yung unang nagbago ay, next slide please. Ang age differences dahil, next slide please. But ibang generation ay nagtitira under one roof, no? So nung araw siguro kung nagtatrabaho ka sa Makati at saka yung magulang mo at nasa Antipolo, you just stay in Makati, have one or two friends that you live with, pareho kayong age, okay lang. Pero yung nagkaroon ng lockdown, marami sa ating mga Pinoy bumalik sa ating tinatawag na family of origin. Bumalik tayo dun sa nanay o tatay natin o lola natin, saan tayo lumaki. Well, for one thing, it was cheaper that way. One hopes it was because of love, but sometimes it isn't always because of love. It's because it's cheaper that way, and why not? Ngayon, dahil ho doon, nagkakaroon ng problema kasi alam naman ho natin, iba-iba ang mga feelings at opinion ng ibang tao, na lalo na pag iba yung edad sa atin. Pero yung hindi ho natin maintindihan talaga ay na itong mga opinion ay hindi lang dahil ay napaka-old fashion naman ito. Uy, napaka-pasaway mo naman, makikinig ka kasi bla bla bla. Ganito yun dahil ho sa ating utak. At because it's because of our brains, something biological, there really isn't much we can do about it. So siguro ho, pag alam natin ito, hindi naman kasalanan ng tao dahil pasaway siya o dahil ayaw niya makinig. Pero ito ay dahil ito ang utak na binigay sa kanya ngayon. What do I mean? Next slide, please. Iba-iba ho ang utak ng tao depending on age. Ang utak ng anak, iba ho sa utak ng magulang. At lalong iba po ito sa utak ng lolo at lola. Sasabihin ko lang, I will tell you two differences for the teen brain. Teen brain, yung utak ng anak. Una ho, ang utak ng anak, very emotional. Very emotional pa rin. Ang reaksyon, hindi masyadong nag-iisip, pero kung gawin ko to, mawawalan ba ako ng trabaho, magagalit ba sa akin ang bossing ko, etc. Ang teen brain hindi pa marunong magplano for the future. Very low in decision making, very low in what is called executive functioning. Bakit po ganun? Dahil ho ba not very bright yung teens, hindi ho maraming matatalinong teenager. Kaya lang ho, pag teenager sila, yung tinatawag na prefrontal cortex nila, yung pinaka-advanced na bahagi ng ating utak po, hindi pa fully developed sa teenager. And what do I mean by a teenager? Alam niyo ho, ang definition ng teenager by the World Health Organization and other medical groups is anyone who is 25 years old or younger. Nakita ho nyo ha? So, 22, 23, 24, teenager pa ho kayo. Yan ang tingin ng international organization sa inyo. Bakit po? Kasi yung prefrontal cortex ninyo ay hindi pa fully developed. At dahil hindi pa ho fully developed ito, ang mga function ng prefrontal cortex kagaya ng gumawa ng desisyon na talagang pinag-iisipan, magplano, plan ahead, wag lang gawin yung gusto mo, etc., ay hindi kaya ng teenager. Kasi yung utak ho niya, hindi pa ho kaya kasi hindi pa ho fully developed. And that is why ang mga teenagers usually are big risk takers. Meron hong pananaliksik, makukutal, siguro alam niyo kung tayo ho, or ako lola na, lolo ko, kayong mga magulang o lola at lolo, makikita niyo yung insurance, driving insurance ng mga teenagers, lalo na paglalaki, ay mas mataas. At bakit ho doon? Dahil ho, they are risk takers. In fact ho, yung isa pa hong nakita na nakakatakyot, and I hope you know this and you will not be super strict with them, kasi ho, as we say, that teenagers are such that they react so quickly and they react to what they think is anger, even though it's not anger. Teenagers are risk takers and they tend to be even bigger risk takers if they are with another teenager. At alam niyo ho, paano na nalaman ito? Napakalungkot ho, but well, that's what the research shows. Pag ang isang lalaki nagmamaneho ng mag-isa, let's just say his accidents are much higher than if an adult nagmamaneho. Pero kung dalawa silang teenager, mas mataas pa rin ho ang aksidente pag dalawa silang teenager. Because I guess they encourage each other to be more reckless. Tapos ho, pag tatlo silang teenager, mas mataas pa rin ho ang mga aksidente. They stopped the studies at 3 teenagers. Baka ho masyadong depressing. Anyway, this is the result ho. So we see that teenagers are risk takers. What else ho are they? They are so emotional, and minsan ho, they cannot judge emotion accurately. Hindi ho nila, they cannot judge the emotion of other people accurately. Kasi ho, there was a study done, and tiningnan nila, no, they did the studies to adults, parents, and to teenagers. So nagpakita ho sila ng mga litrato ng tao na may mga iba't ibang facial expression. Kunwari, yung facial expression ni Forts ngayon, parang neutral. Ngumiti ka naman, Forts. Oh, ngayon, guwapo. Hindi, happy. And can you look angry? Okay. So, ganito po yung ginawa nila, no? They had all these facial expressions and they showed it to teenagers and they showed it to adults. At ang nalaman ho nila is adults accurately judge the expressions as what they were. For example, ito galit. Talaga ang galit. Ito, neutral lang, walang emotion. Totoo yun. Pero ang mga teenagers, so invariably, they would judge so many people to have galit na expression kahit na hindi galit ang tao. Okay? So you see there ho, that sometimes one has to be very careful with teenagers because they react so quickly, and not only do they react so quickly, sometimes what they are reacting to is wrong. Akala nila galit sa kanilang tao, so uunahan na nilang suntukin siguro or whatever. Yung pala hindi galit yung tao sa kanila. Okay? So these two things, teenagers are risk takers, teenagers misjudge the emotion of others. And then the last thing lang ho I want to share with you, and again, this is the function ho of the brain, hindi dahil disobedient ang mga teenagers natin, hindi dahil ayaw nilang sumunod. Ganun lang po ang kanilang katauhan at ang kanilang katawan. Kasi ho, ayon sa pananaliksik, teenagers have a body clock that is 2 hours later than ours. Yung body clock ko nila parang 2 oras na mas late. Kung yung bedtime natin 10 o'clock ng gabi, ang bedtime ho nila 12 midnight. Kung ang bedtime natin 12 midnight, kanila ho 2 in the morning. This is just the way their bodies are. And therefore, what follows, sa imaga ho, ganun rin. So kung tayo nagigising ng 6 o'clock para pumasok, sila 8 o'clock in my experience. So 10, minsan ang hirap-hirap gisingin ng ating mga anak, hindi po ba? Once they reach 14, 15, on to 22, 23, 24, 25, they get up 2 hours later than us. At hindi lang ho ito sa Pilipinas, sa buong mundo ho ito. So much so that there were schools in Australia that seriously thought of not having any classes in the morning at all. But when that was too difficult to do, too expensive, they decided to not have any classes earlier than 10 a.m. because they knew it would be very, very unrealistic to expect their teenagers to go to school. So nakita ho ninyo yun. Okay, they're the teenagers. On the other side, if we go sa utak ng lolo at lola, well, as we know ho, the utak ng lolo at lola, ang ibang mga bahagi, especially the prefrontal cortex also, lumiliit ho. It shrinks. And because it shrinks, we people my age tend to have memory problems, no? So, paano yun? Hindi nila matandaan yung salita. Meron na silang sinabi sa inyo. Sasabihin na naman nila sa inyo after a while. Na alam ko nakakainis ho. Pero siguro ho, if you can deconstruct this and realize, hindi ito sinasadya ng lolo ninyo. Hindi niya ginagawa ito kasi akala nila low IQ kayo o low bat, kaya hindi niyo natandaan yung sinabi nila. Sila na lang ho ang kawawa dahil ganito ho ang utak nila. There is so much more I can say this about neuroplasticity, which means okay lang kahit tumanda kayo and your brain invariably shrinks. Meron kayong magagawa to delay that shrinking. Pero that now is not the time to do that because we want to talk about how to strengthen family ties more. So in addition to multi-generations living together under one roof, there is yet another reason why it is difficult to live together, under lockdown or under COVID. Can we have the next slide, please? And the reason is because of personality differences. No? Sino ho kayo dyan? I think si Forts, itong babaeng naka-red na may polka dot. Anyway, can we have the next slide, please? What do we mean by personality differences? Pagkakaiba at pagbabangga ng ugali, we mean especially introversion and extroversion. Alam niyo ho ito, ang pagiging introvert, ang pagiging extrovert, hindi ito dinesisyon ng tao. Hindi sinabi ng tao, I think I'm going to be an extrovert or I think I'm going to be an introvert. Hindi ho. Kasi if I may just add something a little bit, which we can discuss and you can disagree with me in the open forum, caring-carry ko lang ho yun, okay na okay yun. Everybody would be an extrovert if they could. And I will say this only because studies have shown that extroverts tend to have more lovers than introverts. Okay. However, of course, if you are, followers of any strict religion like I am now after my cancer, I will pretend that doesn't matter to me. If I have only one lover in the world, happy na ako. Because this is the new me. Don't ask about the old me. But going back and of course, which is so sad, yung dalagang Pilipina na description natin, yung bihira lang umibig ang dalagang Pilipina. Totoo ho yun pag ang dalagang Pilipina ay introvert. Pero kung ang dalagang Pilipina are extrovert, pwedeng, hi there. Then, why hello there? Joke only. But really, so you see, you do not choose to be an introvert or extrovert. This is based on the nervous system you were born with. Kasi ang nalaman natin, na-discover natin, ay ang nervous system ng introvert is so much more sensitive than the nervous system of an extrovert. That is why, konti lang ang magyari, naaapekto kaagad ang introvert. And that is why the introvert does not like loud music, does not like party with many people, does not have very many friends. Ang introvert, 2-3 kaibigan, close friends he can rely on, okay na yun sa kanya. He has enough, he has as much stimulation as he wants, no? If he has too much stimulation, if he has more people that he meets every day, he becomes tired. Because another defining characteristic of introverts and extroverts is not just the nervous system, where the nervous system of the introverts is so much more sensitive. It is also where you get your energy from. Extroverts get their energy from other people. Introverts do not. I'm sorry, I haven't looked at the research to find out where introverts get their energy from, but I would think they get it from their alone time, they get it from reading, from thinking on their own. But the fact of the matter is, extroverts get excited, get energized by meeting with people, and introverts do not. So can you imagine during COVID, kung yung pamilya ninyo, lalo na kung yung bata, yung extrovert, bata na nga siya, risk-taking, wants to meet people. Tapos, he needs people. He just does not want people. Talagang may pangangailangan ito to meet people. Can you imagine tapos COVID, tapos lockdown, tapos he cannot meet other people? Kawawa naman. And can you imagine naman, kunwari ako lola, at kunwari introvert ako, kasi extrovert ako. Kung hindi halata, let me tell you, I'm an extrovert. Pero kunwari lola ako na introvert. Tapos meron akong anak na extrovert. Tingnan nyo I will look like this man. Napaka-grouchy yung nakaupo dyan sa PowerPoint, yung nakaupo sa sofa. Kasi maiinis ako sa aking teenager na apo, if he's an extrovert, kasi kahit natin hindi sinasadya, because our personalities are so different, and we live in the same house, kasi pag COVID, hindi lang tayo pwedeng, lalabas ako, pupunta ako sa bowling alley, o sa pub, o sa, restaurant. Hindi ho yung pwede yun. Kaya napakahirap po. Especially if you are different personality types. And it is good lang to know this because dahil alam ninyo na hindi ho ito sinasadya, talagang this is what you are born with. Maybe you can be more gentle. Baka you can be less judgmental. And secondly, in the solutions, we will talk about something else. So if you have two different kinds of people. Okay po? So these are two so far which cause problems, which may debilitate family ties. So knowing about it will help us strengthen it. So there is difference in personality, introverts in quotes versus extroverts, difference in age, especially the difference in the teen, adult, and aging brain. And finally, we have something that has become more and more pronounced now. Before, it used to happen only to older people whose spouses died. But now, because of COVID, it happens to us, more and more of us now. Can we have the next slide, please? And that is what we call uhaw. Uhaw sa haplos. Or what they call it in scientific terms is skin hunger. Hindi ho ba because of social distancing? Hindi ho ba we have to be 6 feet apart? Wala na yung beso-beso, wala na yung I need a hug, wala na ho yung ganun. Hindi ho ba because we may get COVID from each other, people are suffering. They may not be aware of it. And let me just, if I may share with you a very, very old study that shows the power of touch. There are more current studies, so especially on the orphans in Romania. But I did not know enough about that, so I didn't want to share that with you kasi baka mapahiya lang ako. And, you know, I'm not an expert on that. Why will I talk about it? Hindi ba? So let me tell you about a study that was done about 50 years ago on nurseries in the United States, specifically in New York City. Now, this was a study between two nurseries because nakita ho nila same situation, the same funding, the same, everything was the same except the caregiver to children ratio. So the food was the same, the nutrition was the same, as I say, the funding was the same, the number of toys they had, the temperature control, everything was the same. But in one hospital, they had more caregivers for the hospital. So we'll just say you had one caregiver maybe taking care of only 5 children. I'm inventing the numbers. I don't know what the actual numbers are. Whereas you had another caregiver in the other nursery taking care of 10 or 15 children. Because what they found out was that the mortality rate of that orphanage, which had fewer caregivers, so the caregivers had to take care of so many more children, infants, had a very high mortality rate. Why? Kasi raw they realized that these caregivers, hindi ho nila, they had no time and they had no energy to make kandong to the children ho. Ano ho, nakakaiyak ho eh. Bigay lang ng bottle sa bata, yung bata natuto because, you know, necessity is the mother of invention. The children learned how to hold their own water, their own milk bottles, because they had no one holding them to make sure that, you know, they were comfortable with it. And because of that, that was the only difference. So, kulang sa haplos. So, siguro hindi pa ho sila uhaw kasi they did not know the difference because their whole lives, ganun na ho sila if they were in the orphanage. Touch, human touch really matters. Natandaan ko ho yung when I first heard about it, my husband and I were talking because nga ho, what the research had shown then, wala pang COVID, wala pang is that maraming older people, so many older men and women have skin hunger because if their spouse dies, who else will touch them? Ang hirap na ho. Minsan nga. So I think we should also remember this so that even if our parents are old and we would much rather hold a cute baby, hindi ho ba, kesa an aging parent, please remember, we're human too. Your lolos and lolas. And please, if you could also touch them and kiss them and hug them, that would really make a difference. Because ang uhaw sa haplos is very real. And it happens not only between married couples, it can also happen, next slide please. It can also happen between ages, young and old. It's so nice to be hugged. Hindi ho ba? And alam ko yung mga bata, especially boys, pag mga 12, 13, ayaw na nilang magpahalik sa nanay nila, kunwari. But there are times, pag walang makatingin, siguro pumapayag pa rin sila. And that is nice. I think that's nice. And what is even more important about haploso is hindi lang for different people in different ages. Next slide, please. It is also, you can get touch from your pets. Hindi ho ba? And hopefully your pets can get touched by you and from you. Because itong haplos, this being touched and taken care of is really, really important. And it is good for us to know. And isn't it wonderful to know that you have in your power this gift that you can give to other people, and it will make them happy. And you have the power to make them happy this way. So ayan that's one solution is give up your gifts. So can we go to the next slide, please? So now we shall go to solutions. And because I wanted all of this to be research-based, I didn't want it to be merely, although clinical experience is good, but even better than clinical experience is something that is based on research. No? Kasi in the end, clinical is anecdotal evidence. No? So here we have a lot of information, solutions I will share with you. Actually, one major solution I will share with you. And this is based primarily on one study, but there have been many other studies since then. And the study I'm talking about is, next slide please, is the Harvard study. Now, the Harvard study is the longest known study on development and happiness. Okay? I mean, there may be others, but this is the one we know of. That's the longest. People naman ho have said that this pandemic is the largest study we are going to have. Human study we are going to have, perhaps on loneliness, on skin hunger, etc., etc. But anyway, this Harvard study did what? It compared two groups of students. Group A were Harvard students. So what does that imply? They were self-entitled. Most of them were rich. And if there were one or two Harvard students which were not rich, then they were sponsored. Good families, where you define good families as having money. Okay? That is Group A. Group B was the opposite. This is Boston inner city residents, which means inner city poverty, your bathrooms are outside, not in your house. Those are called outhouses. And the same age, and of course the same sex, all boys at that time. And they compared what happened through the years. Now, this study has been going on now for over 75 years. In fact, they have had 4 different directors of that study because 75 years. And so the studies that they have shown, do I have a slide on the results or ako lang ba? Okay, we'll go back to this one. Yes, this one. There are 3 major results from the Harvard study. Reaching the conclusion, I will share the conclusion with you before I forget, that communication is very, very important. And why? Because it is only when we communicate with each other that we can have a really good relationship, a relationship based on trust, hopefully affection. Okay, but a relationship based on trust and goodwill. So the major thing this study has pointed out is that relationships are important. There are 3 major findings. Relationships are important. Relationships define us. As one philosopher said, we are shaped by those who love us, by those who have relationships with us. And I would like to add, we are also shaped by those who refuse to love us, shaped by those who refuse to have any relationships with us. And studies also have shown, and this is what the 4th director of the Harvard study said, loneliness can kill. Well, we have seen it happening in the high mortality rate, hindi ho ba? And here, this is, although you're not an infant and you can feed yourself, you can clothe yourself, if you have no good friends, if you have no relationships, you tend to die a lot earlier than people of the same age, than people of the same age who do have friends. The other study found, again about relationships, is that relationships, what matters when it comes to the relationships is not the number of relationships you have, but the quality of your relationships. So it doesn't mean that extroverts are going to live much longer because they have many more friends than introverts. Hindi ho yun totoo. Ha? Because it is the quality of your relationship that really matters. And what do we mean by that? Third point. What we mean by this is, if you have at least one person that you know you can count on, you're good. Okay? At least one person you know you can count on, and sana you also know that one person counts on you, okay ka na. So you can see, you don't have to be married. You don't even have to live with anyone. Okay? All it is that you have a good relationship. Huh? Because in fact, some of these people have said, at least this last director, who's the one I listen to a lot in TED Talks, he said, because if you are married and your relationship is full of strife, maybe that hurts you much more than the pain of a divorce. Something to think about, hindi po ba? It's interesting. So staying married is not necessarily a good thing to be. Okay? And finally, I also wanted to say that apparently having relationships has good predictive value, because by the time the people were 50 years old, you could more or less guess who would live a long time or who wouldn't. You could guess by the quality of the relationships. By 50, when you said, who kaya would be happiest, who would live the longest, they found out that if by what mattered was not your cholesterol levels, it was not even your blood pressure, and it was not whether you were CEO or a plumber. What really mattered was how many friends you had. And the last point that I will give you is that the important thing, Horaw, to remember while you're getting older is that you keep on making new friends. Why? Because friends your age are gonna die. I mean, that sounds so terrible, but it's true po, hindi po ba? So you should keep on having younger friends. So they'll be around, so they can write your eulogy. Okay? Anyway, so from this whole, let us go to the conclusions because it's already 3:35 and I want to have room for the open forum. So far, there are two things we have to remember. Finding the reasons for your behavior does not automatically mean finding the solution. Let me just give you an example. First, this is a big issue that Sigmund Freud started. Because sabi ho ni Dr. Freud is that insight is enough. It is not enough. In fact, isn't it so nakakainis to hear a person say, "Hoy, sorry, ganito ako. Kasi alam mo, yung mga magulang ko, alcoholic, at saka kaya blah, 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 blah." Parang you feel like saying, look, I don't care. I don't care what your childhood was. I don't care the reason for your being an ass. But I care that you are an ass, so I don't want to have anything else to do with you. So the reason does not automatically mean you are finding the solution. Okay? And the counterpart is also true. Next slide, please. Knowing the solution does not automatically mean you found the reason. Let me give you the classic example that clinical psychologists like to give, which is, if you have a headache, you take a headache pill, whatever you call it, I don't know, paracetamol, etc., etc. So that is the solution to the headache. But it does not mean that you got the headache because you did not take a paracetamol earlier. Diba? Okay. Then finally, last two things to let you know is, next slide. Sayang all our faces are there. But it says, yes, of course, it is okay not to be okay, as the K-drama likes to tell us. However, next slide, please. It is even more okay, or it is okayer to be really okay. All right? So that is the end na ho of my talk. Last slide, please. Thank you very much. And now ho, let us go, tada, to the open forum. I always like to say ho, and I hope you will again prove me right this time, that an open forum is like making love. Parang kung pagsisiping ito. Kasi yung hindi ba corny pag isa lang ang nagtatrabaho, hindi mo ba mas mabuti? Ay, sorry, Forts. I hope I didn't shock you. Hindi mo ba mas mabuti kung pareho kayong nagtutulungan, naghahaplosan, etc., etc. Anyway, I will now be quiet. Forts, the floor is yours.
Well, definitely tama yung sinabi niyo, Doctor, no, na it should be both, di ba? It's a very interesting topic that we have this afternoon. I enjoyed the very minimal slides, but it's full of inputs that I've got. Actually, I had my notes right here. So later on, I'll be asking some of the questions while waiting for the questions from the audience. No?
Sure.
Okay, to just simply jumpstart this open forum, I'd first like to ask, no, to sum it up what you presented, Doctora. I think an open communication should be first established, which you said earlier based on the result of the study ng Harvard University, di ba? So that each family member can feel secure and they can also feel comfortable.
Yes.
The most part would be kailangan tayong lahat, we should feel comfortable sa pamilya natin. Because that's where, at the end of the day, that's where we live. Diyan tayo nagpapahinga. So kailangan, we should have that environment of having an open communication. Now, there are tendencies to cross the thin line between tolerance and abuse. Sometimes, no, if parents tend to be tolerant, may tendency na yung anak, they tend to abuse it. Kaya you also get to hear probably from your counseling that sometimes yung mga parents sinasabi nila na minsan hinihigpitan namin kasi inaabuso nito eh. Can you comment on this?
Aside from saying it's true, okay, yes, that is absolutely right. But you know, I wonder if maybe it had to do a lot earlier. So that if maybe earlier people were honest with each other. I don't know how you can define honesty with a young child, you know. I mean, because we also know we shouldn't tell our young children that, you know, oy, alam mo, abalang-abala kami kasi nawalan ng trabaho yung daddy mo. Kaya, you know, we shouldn't tell them these things, no? But that maybe there reaches a point when children will appreciate the boundaries you give them without making abuso. Oh yes, everybody needs boundaries, especially children, especially teenagers. I think if the teenagers know that these boundaries are real boundaries, hindi bolahan, hindi sinasabi lang nila to, the more they will tend to respect them. Kasi doon naman rin nagkakaroon ng problema pag feeling natin hindi sincere Hindi ba that's one of the biggest times that we have problems, you know. So it is important to try and be from the beginning as honest as possible without burdening your children with realities that they shouldn't have to be burdened by. You know, it is nice to be as honest to them as possible.
Yeah, I think in addition to that, Doctor, if it was established in the beginning pa lang while starting a family, to have this kind of open relationship, to, you know, parents should explain everything sa kanilang mga anak, that it would not reach a point that the kid would abuse, no, yung freedom na binigay sa kanya.
Yes. Sana. Okay. Yes.
Okay, so another point. meron na tanong. Meron na tanong, yeah. We got something from Lee Sisit. Okay. Yeah. It's good that you talk about extrovert and introvert. So ang question niya, would extroverts tend to be more susceptible to loneliness?
You know, that is an excellent question, Lee. Damn you. It's an excellent question, but I don't think I have an excellent answer. Okay, ha? Ang talino kasi ni Leah. So, former chair yan ng psych department sa UP. Tara!
Wow!
Oh, magaling talaga. And many other things, but I won't embarrass you, Lee. Okay, so the superficial answer would be, no, yung you think of automatically, hindi, maraming kaibigan ng extrovert eh. So why will they be lonely? And the introverts, piling-pili yung kaibigan nila. So yes, they have fewer friends. And yet, because piling-pili yung kaibigan nila, I feel they will not be lonely kasi piling-pili sila eh. So hindi mabababaw yung friendships nila. It is only gonna be difficult. Maybe it will be difficult for an introvert if they go to a new place, because of the situation. They're an OFW, they have to go someplace else. Because it might be more difficult for an introvert to make friendships, new friendships then. And in that sense, I think they might be lonelier. However, with extroverts, I think they could also be lonely. So, for one thing, because of the extrovert himself or herself, because she's mababaw. No, because she has so many friends, she doesn't really learn to value who are the true friends or who are the really good people. Basta people are smiling at her, madali lang mag-gimmick, yung ganun, okay na sa kanya. So I think in that sense, an extrovert might be lonelier. However, if you have an extrovert who is also quite discriminating, then that person need not be lonely. So I guess what we can talk about is probability, but not certainty, of course, because being lonely or not is not a function of being an introvert or an extrovert, but I guess is more a function of what kind of relationships you yourself are capable of having. And if you are capable of having deep relationships, you are capable of having honest, validating, healthy relationships, chances are you will have them. At least I sure hope so. I hope I answered your question, Lee. If not, ask another question.
Okay, I think we have a follow-up from Miss Lee Sisit. Ang sabi niya,
Okay.
although it's not a question, sabi niya, maybe open communication can be operationalized. And yes, point on boundaries and sensitivities. These are very important. Okay. Now, we have a next question from Dr. Rob.
Can I just say, and this is not something I will answer now, but I think everyone in the audience can think about how do we define open communication? Is it someone who says right away, hi, I'm Margie Holmes, and when I was 13, I had an abortion. Open communication ba yan? Oh, by the way, that's not true. If it is, I hope you still like me. But anyway, yeah, that's a very good suggestion. Oh, I'll be quiet now. Sige, what's the next?
Okay, here we have something from Mr. Rob Galang Salonga, and he said, "Hi Doc, hope you remembered me. As observed nowadays, being a manager, majority of the teenagers are unpredictable. Having said that, an open communication should be first established. I wonder if we can cite effective approaches or examples to get someone to open up."
You know what? I will be very happy to answer this question. However, do you think we could give 30 seconds so I'm not taking up too much of the time and see if there is anyone among the audience who would like to share? Okay, a developmental psychologist or a mother who has 3 or 4 teenagers in their family. If you have any suggestions what to give, please do. I will wait for 30 seconds. Sports can talk. If anybody, I saw that you can raise your hand or say, I would like to say a few. They cannot pala say, but they can write it down.
They can write it down in the comment section. Yeah, and maybe some of them were still typing. No?
Okay.
Let's go back to that. Let's go back to introvert and extrovert while waiting for some. Okay. Si Miss Beth Solibet. Although it's not related to our exercises after. Sabi niya, I'm thankful I'm a mother during these times. My kids are my happiness. Oh, that's a nice.
Oh, and you have a lot of time to spend with them. You're 100% right, Miss Beth. Can we go back to the question about what teenagers tend to take more risks, are riskier, or and what can we do to have open communication with them?
Yeah, I think let's wait for the audience to
We will before we
come
say
up. Yeah.
okay, and you want to talk again about your favorite subject, which is good. I'm glad.
Okay, sige. Let's move on, and then later on when we get some insights, then we'll pitch in.
Okay, so what shall we? I'm
Sige, let's go back to the question about the question of Mr. Rob Salonga, talking about some examples to get someone to open up.
Okay. Well, studies have shown that the best way you get someone to open up is through self-disclosure, meaning you do not ask the person to tell you things. And I am not talking about therapy, no? Because syempre therapy, you do not self-disclose. Self-disclose is saying something about yourself. Something about yourself that's private. No? So in therapy, you don't do that, even though I know some psychologists do this, which is very bad, which is they talk about themselves rather than listening to the client. Very bad. Okay? But when you're talking about how do you get someone to open up, and even parents, the best way, okay, first, I would think the best way to get your children to open up with you is to listen. Is to listen. And when they tell you things, not to scold them right away, not to make them feel that you know better, even though you may think you know better, and not to make them feel that. Hindi yung lahat, wag mo silang papagalitan. Many of us do not scold our children. But a lot of us do not listen. And that is one of the worst things you can do. And when you have relationships like with your children, the earlier you start, the better. Because if you do not listen to them when they are 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, and then you want to listen to them when they're 17, 18, because this is the time they're starting to take drugs, they might be taking drugs, so you want to be sure you have open communication. It will not work if you haven't listened to them when they were much younger. Why should they think you're willing to listen to them now? And why, for God's sake, should they open up to you now when you never wanted them to open up when you were much younger, when they were much younger? So that is very important. You start young, you start early. Now, this is a philosophy, it doesn't really follow. I mean, sort of. When they talk about sex, how can I have sex in my 80s? You have sex in your 80s by having sex in your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. Because as Masters and Johnson said, use it or lose it. Okay? So how do I communicate with my teenagers? By communicating with them when they were preteens and tweens, or whatever you call it, latent adolescents or latent whatever, and toddlers, whatever. Because it changes. That's why. See, this is why sometimes it is so difficult for parents, because sometimes parents are terrific when their children are a certain age, but they're not so terrific when the children are older. In my clinical experience, parents are terrific when their children are toddlers. And you know why? Because when our children are toddlers, our children look up to us as though we're gods. They do anything we want them to do. They listen to us. They think you're correct. We're never challenged. No? And sana more and more of us learn to be humble, to enjoy the fact of being challenged, and therefore to welcome our interactions with our adolescents and our adult children as much as we do our younger children. Okay? Open communication, listen. Okay? And then if they are not your children, or maybe if they are and your fellow adults, this is the last thing that I'll say, because I know I'm talking too much. And
It's okay. It's fine. It's fine.
so I feel bad, is that self-disclosure. Self-disclosure is being willing to make yourself vulnerable to another person by telling something sacred or special to you. And a lot of times, self-disclosure seems to encourage other people to open up with you also. I'll
Wow,
stop.
thank you for that. Yeah, thanks for that insight. Someone is watching from Iligan City, si Mel Brave Abdul Karim. Thank you so much for watching. And sabi ni Miss Lenny De Jesus, I think they should replay this. Yeah, actually, you can watch this after this live session. Miss Mylene Hernandez would like to ask, what is your take on ambiverts?
On ambiverts, wonderful. And thank you, Miss Mylene, for bringing this up, because then it will get us to talk about Jung, Carl Jung, who was the first one who talked about introverts and ambiverts. And look how sweet this Mylene person is, because she didn't say, oh yeah, why are you only so simplistic ka naman? Introverts or extroverts lang. What about ambiverts? There are some people who are purists and do not want to talk about ambiverts. But of course, ambiverts exist. So what are ambiverts? They would be people who have both introverted and extroverted qualities within them. And that is, of course, all of us. So I'm so happy you asked that question, Mylene, because yes, and I guess you could say that most of us would be, in quotes, ambiverts or introverts. Most of us would be ambiverts. However, if we had to divide people in some way, and later you see that they can be divided, it would be this way. It would be introverts and extroverts. It would be very, very rare to find a person who is completely an introvert or completely an extrovert. So therefore, we would say they would have ambivert qualities. Because as we know, this is what makes people, right? Each one is different. And it is not a statistic. It is not an object. Therefore, you don't have someone that's purely one thing. Yeah, always there are strands. So that makes people more complicated. But that makes it more exciting also, although more difficult to deal with.
Okay, here's another point, Doc.
Yes.
From Albaera, sabi niya, my children are already teenagers. I'm not a perfect parent, but I can say that I'm close with my teens and I'm like a magnet to them. Whenever I reach home from work, they approach me and open up about anything they've gone through the day. I suggest that parents invest quality time with children and be intentional. That's a good insight.
Thank you
Yeah.
very much, Alma. That is wonderful.
Okay, here's another interesting question from my boss,
Oh.
Mr. Vikas Jain. He asked the difference between nuclear family and family with, family that lives with the parents.
Okay, nuclear family is just the mother, the father, and their children. Okay, so 2 generations. Family, mother, father, and their children. I think, ask your boss if what he means is family, their children, and the parents of one of the spouses.
Yeah,
so
most likely.
Generations yon. And in some places, we would call this extended families. Yeah. So if you're talking merely of the differences in terms of objective indices, that is it. I think one thing you could say is that it is extended families are usually at a minimum of 3 generations. And nuclear family is maximum of 2 generations. The other thing I would like to share, which seems to be very important when you look at family dynamics, is the difference between a family of origin and the family of generation. The family of origin is the family where you are the child. Okay? So, my mother and father and their kids, my siblings, they are my family of origin. Okay? My family of generation is the family where I am the parent or the spouse. I am the parent. And it's very important because a lot of times you see, if you do not fix the issues of your family of origin, it will continue, and sometimes it's nakakatakot and nakakaiyak for it, because you see the same issue being played out, family, generation after generation after generation. You know? And it's really very difficult. So
And sometimes it's getting worse, no? As it's
yes,
being
yes,
passed by.
yes, you're absolutely right. I'm sorry. Did my husband want to say? Oh, exact. Can you give an example? Oh, he's asking me to give an example. Kakainis. Okay, and this, of course, it's not as obvious as this. We'll just say, no, what we always tell women, no, who are abused by their spouses, and then they say, but I don't want to leave my husband because what this will teach my daughter, that what this will teach my children is that broken families are okay. And what my husband and I say usually is, if you don't leave your husband, you're teaching your children something else. And that might be even more damaging. You are teaching your children, if you don't leave your husband, you are teaching your children that it is okay for a man to treat his wife the way your husband is treating you, which is not good, right? And the other way, if you leave your husband, you might, if we know she wants to leave her husband, no, we are not the one insisting that she leave her husband. She wants to, but she's scared. And the reason she gives is, I don't want them to think, broken families are okay. You can even say, you are teaching your children that family, the idea of family is so important that only men and women who take pains to treat their family members with respect deserve to have a family. Because that's the excuse always given. So that example is, ganun nga, no? If kunwari the reason is, I don't want my children to have a broken family, grow up in a broken family. So I will learn from my mother, wow, so that's it pala, that women really cry. Because and it doesn't mean my husband is very bad if he makes me cry, because my mother did it too. So sometimes these things pass on. I'm giving a very simplistic explanation, forgive me, but I hope it gets the point across.
Yeah. Okay, here's another interesting question. Perspective on childless family.
Oh, as long as you choose it, everything is wonderful. And sometimes, even if you don't choose it. But I think the important thing for us mga losyang, is not to have losyang ideas that, ay, kawawa naman wala silang mga anak, sino kayang may kasalanan? Pity them, poor thing, they have no kids. I wonder whose fault it is. It's nobody's fault. Some people don't want to have kids, and that's very okay. It doesn't mean that they're selfish. It doesn't mean that they're self-absorbed. They just don't want to have kids. Does it mean they're kuripot because they want all the money to go to them? Not necessarily, but they want all their money for themselves. Why not? No, they want to travel instead of putting the money for good schools, blah, blah, blah. It's perfectly okay. Please don't judge people who are childless by your own standards or by what you want. For many people, it's a choice. And even if it's a choice, it doesn't mean that they are selfish. On the other hand, please also be careful and be sensitive. And, do not ask usual idiotic, intrusive questions, because some people may have had a traumatic experience.
True.
With childbirth, with having kids, etc. So be careful about the questions you ask when you find out that a couple is childless.
I'll bring up my last question, but before
Okay.
that, I just want to read something from the audience because they're so overwhelmed with what's happening right now. Mary Ann Sanchez said, perfectly explained. Big thanks for the learning, especially for us parents. Miss Johanny Tabaco said, thank you for this insightful webinar. A mother of 3, 10 years old, 7 years old, and 3 years old. Joe P. Badoy said, great that we can watch this again. Lady Nora says, thank you for the meaty discussion. Always a great speaker, Dr. Margarita Holmes, according to Miss Venus Banyes.
She's a very good judge of character, Miss Venus. I'm teasing you. Go ahead, I'm teasing you. Sorry.
Okay, last question.
Yes.
Consequence of overprotective parents.
Consequence of over. Okay, first you realize, no, that the parents can try and do everything, but it is not only the parents that are free agents. The child is also a free agent, who does not need, who can push back at what the parents are doing, subtly or not. The parents may not even know. You know, all these people who look like really goody-goodies. Yes, mommy. Yes, daddy. And then when they leave, they make takas, etc. No? But of course, if you are overprotective and the kids grew up that way, they don't know any other way, then they will not know how to navigate the world. They will not know how to navigate the world. Number one, baka they will be fooled by people. So parents, if by being overprotective, you want your children to not be fooled or not be taken advantage of by other people, it is so ironic, hindi ba, that by being overprotective, you are making that sort of thing happen. Okay? So please be aware of that. And you know, actually, if you are overprotective, parang it shows you don't have much respect for your kids. Because it shows that you do not think that they can learn, you do not think either they're intelligent enough, or you do not think that they can learn, they can listen and learn enough from you or other people to learn how to take care of themselves. You know, you need this, hindi ba? Because to be a good parent, what do they say? It's roots and wings. You give them a safe enough environment so they know they have roots there and they're safe, and no matter where the wind blows, nandun pa rin sila, matatag sila. And yet you give them wings so that when it's time, when they're old enough, they can soar through the sky and hopefully live out their dreams, you know. And they can only do that, they can only fly away and leave you, which they should and they must. They can only do that if you have taught them well. I think
Wow.
that's my last words.
So it was a great insight, Doc Margie. Thank you so much for having with us on Health Talk. And we hope that we can invite you again for more topics that we would want to, talk about.
Oh, I would love to. Thank you very much, Forts.
Okay, maraming salamat po ulit. Mga kaibigan, our time spending with our families at home may not end soon. Alam niyo naman, as long as there's lockdown, as long as we have this current pandemic, there are some times that we are really forced to stay at home. I believe this topic is very timely because it gives us the opportunity to show compassion, understanding, being sensitive to others, and even tolerance to each family members. This is not an overnight change though. We go back to basic. And sabi nga dun sa result ng Harvard, it's communication. And this takes a lot of practice, mga kaibigan. But the good news is, you can still start today. We're glad that we have reached out to you with today's topic on Health Talk. And for comments and suggestions on what health topic you think would add value to our lives, let us know in the comment section or send us a private message. And please don't forget to like and subscribe to Zack at Zydus so you get notified with our new contents every day. My name is Forts. Maraming salamat. Goodbye and have a great weekend, everyone.
Zack at Zydus brings you a patient care program, Health Talk, a lay forum that gives various information on illnesses and diseases with advice from medical experts. Join us live on Facebook.